They told us Horizon City was safe. They told us the future lived there, behind the walls, behind the scanners, behind the men in white who smiled with their mouths and nothing else. I believed it for a while. You have to understand, when the world has been eaten down to its bones, you will believe almost anything if it comes wrapped in clean clothes and a warm meal. My boy's name was Callum, 8 years old when we joined the line. 8 years old and already too thin, already too quiet, already carrying the kind of silence that belongs to men 3 times his age. He held my hand the morning we walked into Processing Station 9, and his fingers were cold, and I remember thinking that a child's fingers should never be that cold in August. The line stretched back half a kilometer, families mostly, some lone walkers, everyone gaunt, everyone carrying that same hollow expression, not hope exactly, but the ghost of it. The memory of what hope used to feel like before the phalanx strain turned every city into a graveyard and every government into a footnote. I had been an engineer before, water treatment, municipal infrastructure, the kind of work nobody thinks about until the taps run dry. When the strain hit, I kept our district's pumps running for 11 weeks longer than anyone expected. Didn't matter. The strain didn't care about clean water. It cared about nervous tissue. It cared about spinal columns and brain stems and the delicate electrical architecture that makes a human being rather than meat. The Horizon Corporation had been a biotech outfit before the collapse. Mid-tier, nothing special. But they had deep bunkers and deeper pockets, and when every government on Earth folded like wet cardboard, Horizon was the only institution left standing with the infrastructure to do anything at all. They set up processing stations across what was left of the habitable zones. Come to us, they said. Get tested. If you are clean, we will take you to Horizon City, a community for survivors. The future is safe. We had been walking for 6 weeks to reach Station 9. 6 weeks through dead towns and dried-out farmland and highways choked with abandoned vehicles rusting in the sun. We passed through a city once. I will not name it because naming it makes it real, and what that city had become was something I did not want to be real. The buildings were intact. The streets were clean. But there were shapes in the upper windows. Still shapes. People who had not died from the strain but had not survived it either. They stood at the glass and watched us pass with eyes that tracked our movement in perfect unison, like a flock turning in the wind. Callum saw them. He did not cry. He took my hand and walked faster, and he never complained. Not once. That worried me more than the blisters on his feet or the way his ribs showed through his shirt. A child who does not complain is a child who has stopped believing that complaining will change anything. That is a kind of damage you cannot see on a scan. The station was built inside what had once been a shopping center. The parking lot had been converted into a triage area, chain-link corridors funneling people toward the main entrance like cattle toward a dip. Armed guards stood at intervals, wearing Horizon tactical gear that looked too clean, too new, too well-maintained for a world that had stopped manufacturing anything useful 3 years ago. Their rifles were a make I did not recognize. Sleek, angular. Wrong somehow, in a way I could not have articulated at the time. We shuffled forward. The sun was brutal. A woman ahead of us fainted and 2 guards carried her out of line without a word. I did not see where they took her. I did not ask. When we reached the entrance, a technician in white scrubs scanned a device across Callum's forehead, then mine. She studied the readout with an expression I could not parse. Then she looked at Callum again, longer this time. "The boy comes with me," she said. "He stays with me," I said. She looked at me the way you look at furniture. Standard protocol. Children are processed separately for their safety. You will be reunited in Sector C. I did not let go of his hand. She noticed. She smiled with her mouth. "Sir, this is not optional." A guard materialized at my shoulder, not aggressive, just present, a reminder of the geometry of the situation. I looked down at Callum. He looked up at me with eyes that trusted me completely, and that trust was the heaviest thing I have ever carried. I let go of his hand. They took him through a blue door. They took me through a gray one, and for the next 4 hours I did not see my son. The gray door led to a decontamination corridor. Strip, shower, chemical rinse that burned the skin and smelled like industrial solvent mixed with something organic, something almost sweet. They gave me new clothes, gray jumpsuit, white shoes, a wristband with a barcode. A man with a clipboard asked me questions. Name, former occupation, blood type. Had I been exposed to anyone symptomatic in the last 90 days? I answered everything. I was cooperative. I was exactly what they wanted me to be, because cooperation was the price of finding Callum on the other side. The processing hall was enormous. Hundreds of people sitting in rows of plastic chairs, waiting. The air smelled of disinfectant and recycled breath, and that faint chemical sweetness I would come to know too well. Screens mounted on the walls played Horizon Corporation promotional material on a loop. Clean cities, green parks, children laughing, families sitting down to meals at tables covered in white cloth. The narrator's voice was calm and authoritative, the kind of voice that sells you something without ever admitting it is for sale. A better tomorrow starts today. Horizon, because humanity deserves a future. I watched the faces around me. Some people watched the screens with naked longing, others stared at the floor. A woman across the aisle held a toddler on her lap and rocked back and forth, humming something tuneless and soft. An old man in the row behind me had a photograph in his hands, creased, faded, the faces in it too small to read from where I sat. He held it like a man holds a candle in the dark, carefully, as if the light might go out. I sat and waited. Around me, people murmured. Some cried quietly. A man 2 rows ahead stared at nothing with the fixed gaze of someone who had already left his body and was just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. 3 hours in, a doctor appeared. Not the same technician from the entrance. This one was older, male, with the careful movements of someone accustomed to authority. He walked through the rows like a man inspecting inventory. He stopped at certain people, spoke to them quietly. Some were escorted out through a green door, others through a red one. Nobody who went through the red door came back. I watched, I counted. Green door, 12 people in an hour. Red door, 7. The ratio bothered me, but the thing that bothered me more was the smell that came from the red door's direction whenever it opened. Chemical, sweet. The same sweetness from the decontamination shower, but concentrated, dense enough to taste. The doctor reached my row. He looked at his tablet, then at me. Mercer, Thomas Mercer. That is me. Engineer, water systems. Yes. He studied his tablet for a long time. Your son, Callum, he has been flagged. The word landed in my chest like a fist. Flagged for what? Anomalous blood work. His immune markers are unusual. He is not infected, Mr. Mercer. I want to be clear about that. But there are elements of his biology that Horizon's research division would like to examine more closely. Where is he? He is comfortable. He is being well looked after. That is not what I asked. The doctor looked at me over the rim of his glasses. He had the expression of a man who was not used to being challenged, but had been trained to respond to it with patience rather than force. Medical Wing B, he will remain there for observation. You will be transported to Horizon City on the next bus. When his evaluation is complete, he will join you. No, Mr. Mercer, I am not getting on a bus without my son. The doctor sighed. It was a rehearsed sigh. I had heard it before from bureaucrats, from administrators, from every petty gatekeeper who believed that procedure was more important than people. But there was something else beneath it, something that looked, for just a moment, like discomfort. I understand your concern, but the evaluation is routine, a few days at most. Then I will wait here for a few days. That is not how the program works. Then change how it works. He stared at me. I stared back. I was not a large man. I was not a violent man, but I was a father. And in that moment, the entire weight of what that meant was sitting behind my eyes, and he could see it. "I will see what I can do," he said and walked away. They put me in a holding room. 4 walls, a cot, a toilet, a locked door. I sat on the cot and stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about what flagged meant. Tried not to think about the red door. Tried not to think about the rifles that looked wrong or the chemical sweetness, or the way the technician had looked at Callum, not with concern, not with compassion, but with interest. The way a collector looks at a specimen. I am an engineer. I solve problems by understanding systems. So I sat in that room and I began to take apart the system I was inside, piece by piece. The processing station was designed for throughput. Move people in, categorize them, move them out. Efficient, clean. But the efficiency had gaps. The guards rotated every 2 hours. I had counted from the processing hall. The blue door and the gray door were on the same corridor, separated by about 30 meters. Medical Wing B was mentioned on a directional sign I had seen during decontamination. East Wing, 2nd floor. The wristband they gave me had a barcode, which meant the doors were electronically locked, which meant the barcode was the key, which meant the system trusted the barcode more than it trusted the person wearing it. Engineers think in systems, and every system has a failure mode. At hour 6, a guard brought me food. Protein bar, water pouch, an apple that was slightly too perfect, the kind of fruit that comes from controlled agriculture, not from any tree that remembers what seasons are. I ate, I waited, I listened. The guard's wristband was white, mine was gray, the technicians wore blue. I had not seen what the doctors looked like, but I was willing to bet it was different again. Color-coded access, simple, elegant, vulnerable to anyone who understood that the system saw colors, not people. At hour 8, I asked to use the bathroom. The guard escorted me down the hall. I noted the positions of 2 security cameras, the location of a supply closet, and the fact that the guard's sidearm was holstered on his right hip with a retention strap that required a specific thumb motion to release. I was not planning to take his weapon. I was planning to not need to. Back in the room, I waited. I thought about Callum. I thought about the way he used to laugh before the strain took his mother. I thought about the small, serious face he wore now, the face of a boy who had learned too early that the world was not kind, and that the people who promised safety were often the most dangerous ones in the room. At hour 10, the lights dimmed. Night cycle. The corridor outside went quiet. I pressed my ear to the door and heard the soft footfall of a single guard making rounds, every 12 minutes, consistent, predictable. I pulled the wristband off, examined it. The barcode was printed on a flexible strip bonded to a plastic clasp. The clasp was standard, a friction lock, the kind used in hospitals for patient identification. I had installed similar systems in water treatment facilities for tracking pipe segments through the maintenance cycle. The barcode itself was a simple linear format. No RFID chip, no biometric link. The system trusted the band, not the wrist. I needed a white band, or a blue one, ideally blue. Technician-level access would get me into Medical Wing B without triggering an alert that a guard band would. The supply closet I had seen during the bathroom trip was 12 meters from my room. The door had a mechanical lock, not electronic. A supply closet in a medical facility would have spare wristbands. It was standard inventory practice. I had designed enough access control systems to know that the consumables were always stored close to the point of use. I waited for the guard's footsteps to pass, counted to 60. Then I went to work on the door. The lock on my room was electronic, but the door frame was commercial grade, retrofitted into the shopping center's existing structure. The gap between door and frame was slightly wider than it should have been, the kind of imperfection that happens when you install institutional hardware into civilian architecture in a hurry. I had a fork from the meal tray. Stainless steel, thin enough. It took me 4 minutes. The fork bent, I bent it back, the latch clicked. The corridor was dim, emergency lighting only. I moved fast, staying close to the wall below the camera sightline. I had 14 minutes before the guard came back, 12 for the round, 2 for margin. The supply closet opened with the fork in under a minute. Inside, medical supplies, cleaning agents, and a box of wristbands, blue, still in their packaging. I stripped the barcode from a blue band and bonded it over the gray barcode on my own band using a strip of medical adhesive from a first aid kit on the shelf. It was crude. It would not survive close inspection. But it did not need to. It only needed to fool a scanner for the half second it took a door to decide whether to open. I sealed the closet, moved east, found the stairwell. The door scanner flashed green when I held up the modified band. I took the stairs 2 at a time. Medical Wing B was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that is not the absence of sound but the presence of suppression, soundproofing, sealed doors, air filtration systems humming at a frequency just below conscious perception. The corridor was clean, immaculate. The lights were a blue-white that made everything look sterile and slightly unreal. There were rooms on both sides, small windows in each door. I looked through the first one, empty. The second, empty. The third. Callum. He was lying on a medical bed, eyes closed. Sensors attached to his temples, his chest, his wrists. A monitor beside the bed displayed waveforms I did not recognize, not heartbeat, not respiration, something else. Something that oscillated in patterns too complex for any biological function I knew. A technician sat in a chair beside him, watching the monitor. She had her back to the door. I tried the handle, locked. The scanner beside the door was different from the others, newer, sleeker, with a biometric pad alongside the barcode reader. Blue band was not enough. I needed her to open the door. I knocked. She turned, saw me through the window, frowned, stood, came to the door, opened it 6 inches. This wing is restricted. Identify yourself. Technician Mercer. I was told to relieve you for the night cycle. She looked at my wristband, looked at my face. The hesitation lasted 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, I saw her reach for certainty and fail to find it. I was not informed of a shift change. Communications are backed up. Station 9 is running at double capacity. You have been on for 14 hours. Go get some rest. She looked at me. She looked at Callum. She looked at the monitor. The waveforms were steady. Nothing urgent. Nothing that required her specific attention. Log your ID at the nurse station before you start, she said, and stepped past me into the corridor. I waited until her footsteps faded. Then I closed the door and went to my son. Callum, Cal, wake up. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding me. The tension in his face dissolved into something I had not seen in weeks. Relief, trust, the simple, devastating faith of a child who believes his father can fix anything. Dad, we are leaving. They said I had to stay. They said my blood was special. Your blood is yours. We are leaving. I removed the sensors. The monitor flatlined. I had maybe 3 minutes before someone noticed. I lifted him off the bed. He was light, too light. He wrapped his arms around my neck and buried his face against my shoulder, and I could feel his heartbeat against my chest, fast and small and alive. The corridor was still empty. I moved toward the stairwell. The scanner flashed green. Down the stairs, through the fire exit on the ground floor, into a service corridor that ran behind the main processing hall. I could hear the hum of the building around me, the air recyclers, the fluorescent buzz, and beneath it something else, something I had been hearing since we arrived but had not consciously identified until now. A vibration, low, rhythmic, not mechanical, organic, like a pulse, like the building itself had a heartbeat. The service corridor led past a series of doors marked with symbols I did not recognize. Not any alphabet I knew, not any pictographic system from any culture I had studied. Angular, recursive, patterns that seemed to fold in on themselves the longer you looked at them. I should have kept moving. I should have taken Callum and run straight for the perimeter. But I was an engineer, and the symbols were a system, and the system was telling me something. I opened one of the doors. The room beyond was large, warehouse scale, dimly lit by a phosphorescent glow that came from the walls themselves, not paint, not lighting fixtures, but the material of the walls, a surface that pulsed faintly with that same low rhythm I had felt in the corridor. The air was different in here, thicker, warmer. It tasted the way a greenhouse smells in summer, but wrong, organic growth without sunlight, metabolism without breath. In the center of the room stood a structure. It was not built. It was grown. Columns of dark, ridged material rose from the floor and merged overhead into a canopy of interlocking forms that looked like bone and coral and something else entirely. Something that existed in a category my brain did not have a label for. Something that made my eyes slide off it the way water slides off stone. At the base of each column, tubes ran into the floor or out of it. I could not tell which, carrying fluid that glowed the same phosphorescent blue as the walls. The fluid moved with purpose, not pumped, circulated the way blood circulates by something that had its own rhythm, its own intention. And in the fluid, suspended in transparent pods arranged in concentric rings around the central structure, were people, dozens of them, men, women, a handful of children, eyes closed, mouths slightly open. Their expressions were not peaceful. They were absent. Whatever had been behind those faces, personality, will, the particular electricity that makes a person, had been dimmed to nothing. Wires, no, not wires, tendrils, organic filaments thinner than hair but stronger than anything I could have cut, connected to their spinal columns, their brain stems, the same neural architecture the phalanx strain had been designed to target. I stood there holding my son, and I understood. The understanding came all at once, the way a bridge fails, not gradually, but in a single structural collapse that takes everything with it. Not designed by nature, not designed by evolution, designed. The strain was not a disease. It was a tool, a key, engineered to unlock human neurology and make it compatible with something else. Something that thought in patterns too complex for individual minds. Something that needed networks, not neurons. Colonies, not consciousness. Horizon Corporation had not survived the pandemic by luck or preparation. They had survived because they were the ones holding the key. Callum's arms tightened around my neck. "Dad, I do not like this place." "Neither do I, Cal." I backed out of the room, sealed the door. My hands were shaking. I am not ashamed to admit that. A man who sees what I saw and does not shake is either a liar or something less than human. The service corridor continued east. I followed it. Behind me, an alarm began to sound, muffled, distant, but unmistakable. They had noticed the flatline monitor. They were looking for us. I moved faster. Callum held on. He did not cry. He did not ask questions. He was 8 years old, and he understood, in the way children understand things they cannot articulate, that we were in the belly of something that was not interested in our survival, only in our usefulness. The corridor ended at a loading dock. 2 transport buses were parked outside, engines idling, the buses that carried people to Horizon City. I could see a driver in the cab of the nearest one, head back, dozing. Beyond the buses, the perimeter fence. Beyond the fence, the wasteland. The dead world we had spent 6 weeks crossing to get here. It had never looked so beautiful. The loading dock had a roll-up door secured with a manual chain mechanism. No electronics, no scanner, just a chain and a padlock and gravity. I set Callum down, found a length of pipe against the wall, broke the padlock with 2 strikes that echoed like gunshots in the enclosed space. The driver's head snapped up. He saw me. He saw Callum. He reached for something on the dashboard, a radio, a weapon. I did not wait to find out. I hauled the door up. The chain screamed against the housing. Night air hit us, warm and dry and tasting of dust and freedom, and the faint chemical sweetness that I now understood was not decontamination fluid at all, but the metabolic signature of something that had been growing beneath the station the entire time. We ran across the loading area, past the buses, toward the fence. Behind us, the alarm changed pitch, higher, urgent, the sound of a system that had identified a breach and was mobilizing to contain it. The fence was 3 meters high, topped with razor wire. I set Callum down and knelt in front of him. His face was white in the perimeter lights. Blood from the IV removal dotted his inner arm. "Cal, you need to climb, fast as you can, do not look down." He nodded, no hesitation. I lifted him as high as I could. He grabbed the chain link and climbed with the desperate efficiency of a child who understood that this was not a drill, not a game, not something his father could explain away with a reassuring voice and a hand on his shoulder. His feet found the links. His hands gripped and pulled. He moved like he was born to it, like every wall he had ever been afraid of was just practice for this one. He reached the top. The razor wire caught his jumpsuit, tore it, drew a thin line of blood across his forearm. He did not stop. He did not flinch. He went over the top and hung on the other side, feet dangling, fingers white on the chain link. "Drop, I will catch you." He dropped. I caught him. My hands closed around his ribcage and I set him down, and for 1/2 second I pressed my forehead against his and breathed him in, sweat and antiseptic and the faint copper smell of his blood, and then I climbed. I am not 8 years old. I am not light. I am a 43-year-old engineer with bad knees and 6 weeks of malnutrition behind me. The razor wire opened my palms, my forearms, the back of my right hand. I went over the top with blood running between my fingers and dropped 3 meters onto hard ground and felt something in my left ankle shift in a way it should not have. A pop, a grind. The kind of sensation that tells you something is broken, and you are going to ignore it because the alternative is lying on the ground while your son watches men with alien rifles come to take him back. I stood, Callum was beside me. The perimeter lights were coming on, sweeping the ground in wide arcs. I could hear boots, shouts, the hum of those wrong-looking rifles powering up. We ran. Not toward the road. The road led to Horizon City, and Horizon City was not a city at all. It was a processing facility, a farm, a place where human nervous systems were cultivated and harvested and integrated into a network that served something so far from human that it did not even have a word for what it was doing to us. It did not need a word. It had a process. We ran into the wasteland, into the dark, into the nothing that had terrified us 6 weeks ago and now felt like the safest place on earth, because the nothing was honest. The nothing did not smile with its mouth while it threaded filaments into your spine. The nothing did not promise you the future while it hollowed you out and filled you with something that thought in patterns no human mind was built to hold. Callum ran beside me. My ankle screamed. I did not stop. You do not stop. That is the thing they never understood about us. Not the corporation, not whatever sat at the center of that grown structure beneath the station. Not the intelligence that had engineered the strain and seeded it across our world like a farmer preparing soil for a crop it intended to plant. You do not stop. Not when your son is beside you. Not when his hand is in yours. Not when every cell in your body has decided that the universe can throw whatever it wants at you, plagues, corporations, alien architectures grown from living bone, and you will keep putting one foot in front of the other because that is what a human being does. That is what a father does. We are not brave. We are not strong. We are stubborn, and we are angry, and we love our children with a ferocity that has no equivalent in any language, including whatever language is spoken by the things that built that structure. They did not chase us far. I do not know why. Perhaps we were not important enough, 2 units of substrate, one of them defective, neither worth the expenditure of resources it would take to retrieve them from open wasteland in the dark. Perhaps the system was designed for compliance, not pursuit, built to process the willing, not to hunt the defiant. Perhaps they looked at the wasteland and calculated that it would kill us more efficiently than they could. They were wrong. We walked for 3 days. My ankle swelled to twice its normal size by the first morning. I fashioned a splint from a road sign and strips of my jumpsuit and kept moving. We drank from a culvert on the first day, rainwater that tasted of rust and concrete. On the second day, we found an abandoned fuel station with a water tank that still held a few liters of brackish but drinkable water. I carried Callum when he could not walk. He walked when I could not carry him. We did not talk much. There was nothing to say that our feet were not already saying with every step. At night we slept in the shells of dead buildings. I held him against my chest and listened to the wasteland, the wind, the distant creak of metal, the occasional sound of something moving in the dark that might have been an animal or might have been nothing at all. On the second night I woke to find Callum awake, staring at the ceiling. "Dad," he said, "the people in those pods, were they dead?" "No," I said, "they were not dead." "Are they going to be okay?" I did not answer for a long time. "I do not know, Cal, but we are going to be okay, I promise you that." It was a promise I had no right to make. I made it anyway. That is what fathers do. We make promises we cannot keep and then we spend everything we have trying to keep them. On the third day we found others. A camp. 18 people who had run from different stations at different times for different reasons, but who had all arrived at the same conclusion. Horizon was not salvation. Horizon was consumption, dressed in clean clothes and corporate branding. A woman named Vasquez ran the camp, former military. She had a map marked with locations of every processing station she knew of, and beside each one, a symbol in red. The same angular, recursive symbol I had seen on the doors in the service corridor. She had been inside. She had seen what I had seen. "They are not from here," she said the first night while Callum slept against my shoulder. "The strain, the corporation, the structures underneath. None of it is ours. Something came here a long time ago, something patient, something that thinks in centuries, not years. It seeded the strain, built the infrastructure, waited for us to come to it, voluntarily, gratefully, carrying our children in our arms." "What do they want?" I asked. "Substrate," she said. "Neural substrate. Human nervous systems are compatible. Something about the way our brains are wired, the complexity, the adaptability. They cannot build what we are. They can only use it." "Then why not just take us? Why the processing stations, the tests, the pretense?" Vasquez looked at me. She had hard eyes, the kind that had seen enough to burn away everything soft. But in that moment, there was something in them that might have been respect. Because a nervous system under stress produces different architecture than one at rest. Fear, resistance, fight or flight, it changes the neural pathways, makes them less useful, less compatible. They need us calm. They need us compliant. They need us to walk involuntarily and lie down and believe that what is happening to us is good. She paused. They need us to stop being human. I looked down at Callum. His face was slack in sleep, peaceful in a way he never was while awake. I thought about the monitor beside his bed, the waveforms that did not match any human biological function, the technician watching them with the focus of a scientist observing a promising culture. His blood was special, they had said, anomalous immune markers, something in his biology that was of note. He was resistant, not immune. Nothing is immune to something that was specifically engineered to exploit you, but resistant in a way that their system did not know how to categorize. His nervous system refused to configure the way it was supposed to. His neurons kept firing in patterns that were too chaotic, too human, too stubbornly individual to be useful as substrate. They had wanted to study him, to understand the resistance, to find a way to break it. I held him tighter. Over the following weeks our camp grew, 30 people, then 50, then 100. Word traveled through the wasteland the way it always has, carried by feet, whispered at water sources, scratched into walls. There are others. There is a place. They are fighting back. We were not an army. We had no weapons that could match those wrong-looking rifles. We had no infrastructure, no supply chains, no technology beyond what we could scavenge and repurpose. What we had was something the architects of the Horizon system had not accounted for and could not model. We had each other. Vasquez organized us. I designed systems, water collection, waste management, communication networks built from salvaged electronics, and the stubborn creativity of people who refused to believe that the world was finished. A former teacher named Okonkwo built a school. A paramedic named Chen built a clinic. A teenager named Reyes, who had escaped Station 14 with burns across 60% of her body, built a radio transmitter from car batteries and copper wire and broadcast a single message on a loop, 24 hours a day. Do not go to Horizon City. The future is not safe. We did not win. I want to be clear about that. There was no battle, no glorious charge, no moment where we stormed the gates and tore down the structures and sent the intelligence behind them screaming back to wherever it came from. That is not how this kind of fight works. This kind of fight is longer and quieter and harder than anything you can put on a recruitment poster. What we did was refuse. We refused to walk into the stations. We refused to lie down. We refused to be calm, compliant, compatible. We built a settlement in the wasteland and we lived there, stubbornly, imperfectly, humanly. We got sick and we got better. We argued and we reconciled. We buried our dead and we raised our children, and we did every loud, chaotic, irrational thing that human beings do when they are allowed to be human beings rather than substrate. And the camps multiplied, not just ours, others. Across what was left of the continent, people heard the signal and turned away from the processing stations and walked into the wasteland and found each other. It was not organized. It was not strategic. It was the most human thing imaginable. People choosing each other over comfort, choosing freedom over safety, choosing the hard, uncertain wasteland over the clean, well-lit rooms where something patient and alien waited to thread itself into their spines. The stations are still there. The structures beneath them still pulse with that low organic rhythm. The intelligence behind them still waits, still plans, still thinks in centuries. I do not pretend that we have beaten it. You do not beat something like that. You outlast it. You outstubborn it. You make yourself so aggressively, inconveniently, defiantly human that the system designed to process you cannot find a category to put you in. Callum is 12 now. He is taller than his mother was. He has her eyes and my hands and a laugh that sounds like the world before the strain, like a sound from a time when children did not have to be brave. He runs messages between the camps. He is fast and he is careful, and he knows every shadow in the wasteland by name. Sometimes at night when the camp is quiet and the fires are low, I catch him looking toward the horizon, toward the glow of Horizon City, still visible in the distance, still promising the future, still waiting. He looks at it the way I used to look at it, with that ghost of hope. That memory of what hope felt like before we learned what it cost. Then he turns away, and he comes back to the fire, and he sits beside me, and he is warm and he is here and his fingers are not cold. That is enough. In a world that tried to take everything from us, our cities, our governments, our nervous systems, our children, that is more than enough. That is the whole story, really. Not a story about victory. A story about refusal, about a species that was harvested and processed and integrated into something vast and alien and patient, and that looked at the thing harvesting it and said no. Not with weapons, not with technology, not with anything the intelligence behind the stations could have predicted or modeled or countered. Just no. And then we built a fire, and we sat beside it, and we lived.